Hi, I'm Gretchen Burns Bergman, co-founder and executive director of A New Path, Parents for Addiction Treatment and Healing, and lead organizer of our national, actually international, Moms Unite to End the War on Drugs campaign. Today, my guests are New Path members. We have at the bottom of the screen, April Ella, Lucky Michael at the top of the screen, and Cecilia Farfan Mendez. And we're talking today about our Moms Resolutions campaign, declaring what we will resist and defend in the name of human rights, dignity, and equality. This campaign started at the beginning of 2017 with an administration that threatened basic human values. And really has proven to unleash a flood of bigotry and hatred. The campaign continues today, although we're very hopeful with the new administration that they will be addressing diversity and equity. But I think silence creates a form of acceptance. So we must continue to speak out as individuals, as mothers, as parents, for tolerance and equality. So we will begin. I'll ask each of you just to say a few words, and then I'll talk about the different points of the Moms Resolutions campaign. But I want you to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about you and what brings you to this work, why this is important to you. I think we'll start with April Ella, who's actually the Director of Operations at A New Path and heads up our Ask Mom How to Save a Life campaign with overdose prevention and Narcan distribution. So we'll start with you, April.
Hi, like Gretchen said, I am the director of the Narcan distribution program. We've been doing this since 2014. I started in 2014 as well, and then started heading up the program in 2015 and have done it since then. I've been here doing this work because I'm super passionate about it. I actually used to do fashion show production with Gretchen. I went to school for fashion. I had nothing under my belt when it came to drug policy reform, to social justice initiatives, anything like that. And once I kind of went over to take over for someone who had just recently left A New Path, I kind of just started getting into the work more and more. Every time I started a new project, every time I started doing more trainings, the need was so great that I did not want to do fashion show production at all anymore. And that is where I still stand. So, and it's going to keep going that way.
Although you get brought in every once in a while with the fashion shows.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And Lucky Michael.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lucky Michael. I've been working in social services for about 12 years, serving people experiencing homelessness. And what's brought me to New Path is being able to advocate for individuals who are living with co-occurring disorders and experiencing homelessness, where that intersects.
And you're working directly with that population, and it's really important work. And Cecilia.
Thank you, Gretchen, and good morning, everyone. I'm Cecilia Farfan. I'm the head of security research programs at the Center for U.S.-Mexican Studies. I essentially study organized crime and violence in Mexico, and this research, of course, has led me to drug policy and working with mothers who are searching for their missing loved ones. In Mexico, in particular in Sinaloa, there are too many people who die. It doesn't have to be this way, and so this is what brings me to this research.
Thank you, and I should say that what brings me to this, as April said, I'm a fashion show producer, so it wasn't my profession I never dreamed that I would be speaking about drug policy so loudly and for so long, but it was my experience with my two sons. My most important role of my life was being a mother, and both of them ended up being addicted to heroin and being involved with a punitive criminal justice system that misunderstood and mishandled the problem. And so A New Path was begun in 1999 by 3 parents who had children who were struggling with addiction and whose lives were being damaged by a punitive prohibition, policies that punish rather than heal. And so that's what brings me to this work. This particular campaign really, and we're reminded about it so much. We've been working to end the war on drugs, but we have to also look at the fact of the intersection of racism, of the war on drugs, the war on women, the war on immigrants, the war on the poor, the war on LGBTQ. And so that sense that we can't just kind of be working in our silo, but that we need to address it as a whole. And so we came up with 7 points of what moms will accept. And I'm going to read them to you, and then I'll ask each of you to address individual points. The first is we will increase efforts to dismantle the war on drugs. We've seen a lot of progress over the past years. I mean, certainly over the last 2 decades that I've been doing this work, with people understanding that that substance use disorders need to be handled as a public health issue and not a criminal justice issue. But there's still so much work to do. And this is not just a war on drugs that the United States owns, it's a global war on drugs, right? The second point is that moms must resist all forms of prejudice and bigotry. I'll speak to that because I'm a woman of white privilege. I acknowledge that we all need to dive deep about some basic untruths that we were taught. I mean, that are a part of our being. We must dig deep, recognize biases and beliefs that are not truth, and deal with that so that we can work together in unity, so that we truly have equality for all, right? So moms will protect the rights and dignity of all people. And I think that's one that I'm going to toss to Lucky, so you can delve deeper, because you're really on the ground with this and the population that you're seeing.
Absolutely, Gretchen. Definitely, we're demanding that, especially with this, new opportunity with this administration, that we prioritize funding that is definitely available towards vulnerable populations, right? Oftentimes we hear this scarcity mentality that there's just not enough and we're a nation of abundance, the money is there, and that it just needs to be reprioritized to people experiencing poverty, who have been victims of unjust policies for many, many years. Certainly that includes Black people for sure. Even here in San Diego County, African Americans make up 5% of the population, but are overrepresented in homelessness at 30%. So again, the money is there. We're a nation of abundance and a state of abundance with the 5th largest economy in the world. So we demand that resources be allocated. It's time and it's well overdue.
Absolutely, thank you. The next point is moms will peacefully protest. This is a mouthful. Racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, and xenophobia. I just felt that had to be spelled out like that. And April, I'd like you to address this, because I know you're involved with many different groups besides A New Path, doing protest work. So April.
I'm really active in the community, not just with A New Path. I do a lot of things with A New Path to spread the word in other communities, but I've marched and protested, worked with numerous local movements, including Anak Bayan SD, which is a Filipino organization, Black Lives Matter San Diego, March for Black Women, and Kumeyaay Defense Against the Wall, all of which actually we fight against misogyny, racism, sexism, homophobia, and xenophobia, but all of those groups have common ground with those issues, but as well as common ground with the war on drugs. Even in my home, the Philippines, Duterte, we all know, has taken his drug war campaign to extremes by executing drug users and dealers in the streets, and they've killed upwards of 12,000 individuals just for using and dealing drugs, which is an absolute terrible way to handle things that should be, like we said, a healthcare problem, not a criminal justice problem. And when you take it here to the communities in the United States, the communities that are most impacted and overlooked when it comes to policy treatment are and rehabilitation are communities of Black and brown color. These are communities that have so much prejudice against them. We're all aware that the drug war was waged against specific groups to keep them in poverty, in prison, and in a system that doesn't want them to reach success. Black and brown communities have higher numbers of incarcerated peoples, overdoses, COVID deaths, and this is all due to an unequal healthcare and justice system. With the work that I do specifically with Narcan distribution, not just in protest, but also when I meet these groups in protest, I try and offer my services. I let them know that I can help with educating and providing Narcan kits and trainings and to prevent opioid overdose within their communities. It's part of one part of the equation that I can help with, other than stand alongside them when they are protesting all of these atrocious things that the previous administration kind of brought out. I'm here to help in any way they can, and there's still so much work to be done, like we all have been saying, but one of our resolutions is to keep going and spread that awareness when it comes to opioid overdose, the drug war, and hopefully the new administration will learn and make change and direct funding and attention and real work towards this epidemic to kind of reverse this and end this war on drugs.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
that was fabulous. Thank you. So moms will steadfastly promote peace and tolerance in the face of hatred. We're in San Diego, which is right close to the border. And so we have moms who've lost, the moms that disappeared, as Cecilia was alluding to, in partnership with moms on this side who are losing their kids to overdose and to incarceration, or mass incarceration here. The moms are mourning together across borders. So I'd like, Cecilia, you have so much experience in this field of the border and immigration and such, if you would address that.
Well, to build on what you all have been saying, substance use or just drug policy has been constructed around the very few individuals that develop substance use disorders, right? And so we have this very punitive approach, built on a narrative that comes from, just very few people who will develop, substance use disorder. And so if we think about what the impact has been around the world and thinking, okay, this is a proven failed policy, the war on drugs, and yet we continue to implement it. And I cannot think of any other policy that continually has failed in the face of so much evidence, and yet it continues to be applied. Fortunately, I think in California and at the border in particular, we have seen some changes, and this is where civil society has been so instrumental in really implementing new ways of thinking about this and say, okay, how can we better serve the community of drug users that we have? And at the border in particular, what we have there is this junction of both drug trafficking, drug users, and people dying from overdoses, right? So in this very particular region, we see, all of the ingredients that go into how this narrative is constructed. And so if we look at what civil society has done, it's quite impressive. In Mexicali, just a few minutes away from us, we have the first consumption site for women in Latin America, right? And that tells you, in my view, that okay, there's people who understand that the problem should not be solved through a punitive approach. And so how can we build this, right? And having needle exchange programs, having Narcan distribution. And so to the extent that civil society can have those dialogues with government and say, hey, I have ideas, I have solutions, and not just expecting governments to do it, but helping governments do it at the same time, I think we can see some movement. Of course, we would like to see these, for both the countries, but I think in that way, the border is an innovation site. And so I have a positive view that even though 2020 will be, and we have some preliminary data on this, right, for overdose deaths and homicides in Mexico, it's not great, right? But at the time, I think from the border, we can offer expertise and insights on what are better ways to address these. And so in that way, while our tragedies unite us, I think at the same time, the border is a site of hope, even though normally we don't think of it that way.
I love putting it in that perspective. I mean, that's very hopeful to me. I mean, I've always believed that we must speak out, but with many voices speaking out together, I mean, we can change. I mean, moms have since the beginning of history been at the forefront of needed change for actually to keep the human race going, right? For the futures of our children and our children's children, that moms banding together, or women banding together to promote peace, tolerance, better futures is powerful. You know, we touched on harm reduction. Of course, the work that we're doing with the new path with overdose prevention and the syringe exchange is harm reduction. Changing to a public health rather than a criminal justice approach is harm reduction. So, and I have to tell you that 20 years ago, if I said harm reduction, people would say, "Why are you promoting drug use?" You know, I mean, so I can really see that we've made changes, but we still have so far to go. And the United States is behind so many other countries. Yes, we need to have safe consumption sites. Syringe exchange is not universally okay in this country yet. You know, I mean, and yet we're at the syringe exchange. April leads our Narcan distribution. A lot of that is in places like the syringe exchanges where you do meet up with a lot of homeless populations and such. And because we care about people, we want to keep them alive, right? My son Elon is at the syringe exchange right now giving out Narcan. But again, we have a long way to go, and we won't get there unless we continue to push this agenda as parents, as people. I'm going to give one more of these. Moms must fight against mass incarceration. We are starting to see, especially because of COVID-19, that people are coming out of, nonviolent drug offenders are coming out, but that's because of the problem with COVID-19 behind bars. We still have so much work to do to make prisons the place where only violent rapists and murderers go, not nonviolent drug offenders and people convicted of petty crimes because they're poor, right? So I wondered if I could toss this back to Lucky to talk a little bit further about that or about anything else you want to discuss. I know there's so much that you do and that you do for the community. So I'll toss it to you, Lucky.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely agree with everything that you said. And when we talk about harm reduction, clearly that's not just a humane approach, right? Some of the rhetoric that we often hear from the previous administrations and those of that ilk are that these efforts are not being fiscally responsible. We know that when we put people in housing and provide them with basic things that human beings need, it's the most cost-effective way of addressing the problem in the first place, right? So we know provide people with housing opportunities and address substance use disorders by providing treatment options and reducing harm to people in the long run saves taxpayer dollars far more money, right? So again, the resources are there. We just need to prioritize them, and we need to give people opportunities to improve their quality of life because it's the just thing to do. But also, if you want to argue that, from a cost-effective approach, that is the approach that is evidence-based, and it's clearly one that works better than anything else we've ever tried.
Mm-hmm. And harm reduction strategies like safe consumption sites have been proven to really reduce stigma. The example in Portugal, it helped in so many ways in terms of reduction of Hep C, HIV. Portugal decriminalized all drugs. They're just like put that out there, and the results have been so good. But the overdose death rate plummeted. But the biggest take home was that that seeing people as people who needed some assistance, some help with their health problem, right? So we weren't the shame, the reduction of shame and blame was incredible. So we can see that harm reduction strategies, improve lives, just not just physical lives, but emotional, a whole well-being. I'm going to toss. I know that Cecilia needs to leave just 5 minutes early. This is a half-hour program, and I'm going to just say the last bullet is moms will be vigilant in defending our values and principles. So I'm going to toss it to you, Cecilia, so that you can get off in a timely manner when you need to.
Thank you, Gretchen. I mean, one of the most rewarding and truly learning experiences for me in working with A New Path and meeting people through your organization, and also the work I do with disappearances in Mexico, is really seeing the mothers, as you were pointing out, leading the effort, but also the right they have to take care of their loved ones, right? And so a lot of times, for example, in the cases of moms who are searching for their children, mostly male, not only, but mostly, there's this very unfortunate narrative of like, well, they must have been, doing something wrong, right? So they must have been criminals, they were entangled, with, something that they shouldn't have in the first place. So somehow they had it coming, right? And the response is, well, even if my son was doing something wrong, even if he was involved in crime, I still have a right to bury him. I still have a right to find him and give him a proper burial. And I think, in line with what you were just saying about treating them as human beings, this is part of it, removing the shame and stigma. And what I find so interesting about these moms is saying, well, even if, he was a criminal, then let him have a process with the law and let me bury him, right? As opposed to this idea of, well, he ended up in a, mass grave because somehow he deserved it, right? And I think, as unfortunately we're seeing more of those moms in Mexico trying to find their children, it's becoming increasingly harder, right? To just say, well, no, you don't get to do that, like to bury your son or your daughter. And I think, as with harm reduction, as we learn about these stories, right, as like, well, they also, these moms have a right to take care of their children, then we see, a shift. Obviously not in the speed that we would like it to see, but I think, again, there's some room to hope there, that the narrative is changing and moving in the right direction.
Thank you. And I think with the new administration, again, I'm very hopeful that some of our atrocious immigration policies will be ending soon. I know that's on the agenda, and I'm very hopeful that will happen. It's been very difficult to witness children being torn from the arms of their parents at the border, and so maybe this is the dawning of a new day. I'm very hopeful that. Thank you, Cecilia. I know that you need to leave. Thank you very much for your work. I'm going to toss the next thing to April, and thank you, Cecilia. April, you do great work for A New Path and in the community. I'd like to share just a little bit about the numbers that we're seeing since what I just call the triple crisis of COVID-19 and the overdose opioid epidemic and systemic racism. We've seen the numbers of overdose deaths pretty much skyrocket. I have a figure here. Since COVID started, drug deaths have increased 13% over the last year. So I'd like you to just share and with the numbers of people that we're training in our community. And by the way, we've got moms across the nation who are, some of them distributing Narcan out of the trunk of their car. getting it out there, because nobody's life can be, people can't find recovery if they're dead, period.
Yeah. They definitely cannot find recovery if they're dead. And that's the whole point of our program. And I think people forget that a lot of the time, because yes, it is harm reduction, but that whole after portion of it, like, well, they've overdosed, now I have to save them. But this is still part of it, because you can't work on recovery if you're passed away. So we've trained over 7,000 people in San Diego County now. Across, from the needle exchange to, we have a program with the sheriff's department, with San Diego probation department. We have things set up with NAMI and the homeless, their homeless clubhouse. We've been giving out Narcan and backpacks there, making sure that people that are getting the supplies they need as homeless individuals, but also with the supplies they need for if they run into somebody that they know, care about, see on the street that might have overdosed. We're kind of all across the board when it comes to distributing Narcan, because we want it to be in everybody's purse and medicine cabinet and in their hands so that they can rescue someone. We have new numbers I have not entered yet. I believe the last number of recorded saves was at 1432, Gretchen?
1453.
1453, and there are 2 whole weeks, or not, excuse me, 2 whole sessions that we had at the needle exchange that I have not inputted yet. So that number is definitely at least 50 individuals larger. It's a lot of work. It's work that I'm appreciative of Elon, my partner, which is Gretchen's son, Kelly Gebbe, who's also she's our vice president in our board. Our board president, Caroline, goes out when she can as well. And we have Nathan Smitty up in North County who takes care of the trainings up there. So I can't do this work on my own. This is not something I do by myself, but it's a lot of work that we put into this when it comes to speaking with everybody, to doing these trainings and everything like that. So that's the number now, and that's how many people we've trained, and it just keeps going every week. And I still do at least 2 Zoom trainings every single week, for usually pretty large groups.
Thank you. And I wanted you to say that because for those of you that are watching, you're not in San Diego County, but you can reach out to us. We do have partners in 35 states. So many of them doing this work. Some working more on the decriminalization side, and some working more on the harm reduction side. But join us on Facebook. There's a New Path, as well as the Moms United to End the War on Drug pages. Join us. You can reach out if you have any questions, or you want to, you need to be trained, certainly reach out to us on Narcan. And really help us to carry this message. Silence is not an option. We must defend human rights and dignity. Lucky, I'm going to toss it to you for one last comment before we close.
Oh, yes. I guess I'll close with, again, we have a great opportunity now. Certainly there's absolutely no power greater than people power. And we've seen what that has done, both with this administration. We wouldn't have gotten here had it not been for folks like April and people in our community going out there, taking the street, reclaiming our communities, and demanding what is rightfully ours: access to care, access to housing. And I hope Springs is eternal, and I look forward to holding people accountable, same as everyone on this call, and making sure that we get our fair share and advocate for the needs of our community.
Thank you. Thank you. And I should point out that the Moms Resolution campaign is in January, but we also have our Too Many Moms morning campaign, which will continue as long as this triple crisis is going on. And as soon as mothers are mourning for so many different reasons, at the border when their children are ripped from their arms, mothers who are losing their children to overdose, mothers who are losing their children to COVID. So that we have these masks that if you would like to have one, reach out to us. That's all about the intersection of the war on drugs and racism and basic prejudices and biases. And next month we will be here again, and we'll be talking about true love, not tough love. Our ongoing campaign to debunk the whole philosophy of tough love and codependency and enabling and teaching people tolerance and compassion, and helping one another to find health and well-being. Right? So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to Cecilia, who's already off right now, but to Lucky Michael and to April Ella, thank you for being on the show, and thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you.